These are multi-million-dollar scams that left Pawn Stars in ruins. Joe Jackson's autograph. This is possibly the biggest mistake Rick Harrison has ever made, mainly because he broke a fundamental rule about sports memorabilia, which is that you should never buy an item signed by a famous player unless you are absolutely sure it's his signature. In this episode, a man named Joe arrived with a book that he claimed was signed by the legendary baseball player Joe Jackson. Any item that belonged to this man would have been very valuable, and Rick knew it. The problem with this was that Joe Jackson was illiterate and therefore had one of the rarest signatures in existence because he couldn't and wouldn't sign much due to his poor handwriting, and that opened the door to many forgeries of said signature.
Of all the sports signatures in the world, this is the one most faked. Okay, and I have no idea who this person is who authenticated it.
Even with this knowledge, Rick paid $13,000 for it.
I'll go $13,000. I won't go a penny more. I mean, ask for $1 more, you can just pick the book up and leave.
Let's do it.
And as you can imagine, this ended very badly for Rick, since when an expert analyzed the autograph, she said the following.
And then the K here goes straight into an O, whereas this, the K, he tries to do the loop. I'm not convinced that it's real.
Naturally, Rick was furious at having fallen for such a bad forgery. Wells Fargo Strongbox. A customer walked into Rick's store with a Wells Fargo Strongbox that was supposedly from the 18th century. What made this particular safe so special was basically the notoriety behind it. The Strongbox became an iconic piece of Western history to the point where you'd find Wells Fargo safes in the background of most movies. In other words, this is a collector's item. After inspecting the items, Rick tells the customer that the ball and chain are fake.
And my other big concern, never in the history of any prison did they ever have their name put on the balls.
Okay, so what are you trying to say?
It's fake.
The customer acts surprised and quickly changes the subject, asking Rick to consider the Wells Fargo Strongbox. Without calling an expert, he decides the safe is authentic and begins the negotiations.
Box, I'll give you $400 for it.
I want $1,200 for it.
No, you don't.
The customer wants $1,200 for the safe. Rick convinces him to drop the price to $450, which he probably thought was a great deal. However, when Rick later called an expert to look at the safe, Mark inspected the safe and outright declared it a counterfeit item.
This is a complete fantasy piece. It's a complete fake.
He claimed it's one of the most counterfeit items on the market, and that's exactly what Rick got. Rick really should have known the safe was a fake, considering the same person he bought it from tried to sell him a fake ball and chain in the same transaction. Madonna's Day Planner. This man entered the store holding under his arm none other than Madonna's 1988 personal planner. According to him, the notebook is filled with handwritten notes from the Queen of Pop herself, phone numbers, recording dates, celebrity birthdays, and even hearts drawn around Sean Penn's name. When Corey asked him how he got such a relic, the seller explained that he had bought it at a highly respected auction, and now said that he wanted no less than $25,000. Corey looked at him like someone trying to figure out whether he was talking to a salesman or a possessed fanatic. He admitted the object was interesting, but had no idea how to evaluate it, so he did what they always do in the store when something smells fishy. He called in an expert. The expert arrived, introduced himself as Steve, and began a forensic analysis of the notebook. He compared letters, curves, lowercase letters, and after a few minutes of intense observation, he concluded what everyone wanted to hear. Yes, it was authentic. Madonna had written that in flesh and ink. But then came the bad news. The expert valued the item at $10,000. The seller frowned. He clearly expected more, saying he'd been offered much more than that before, although of course you never know if that someone exists beyond his imagination. Corey then went ahead and offered him $4,000. The seller considered the figure insulting. Corey politely raised it to $5,000, but there was nothing more to be said. The seller, still convinced that his notebook was worth more than Mona Lisa, left angrily the store. Shekel of Tyre. A man named Ryan arrived with a Jerusalem coin. This is a silver coin that was used in Lebanon from 130 BC to 79 AD. It's not the type of item you'd normally find in a pawn shop. As Rick inspects the coin more closely, he notices it has been cleaned. He informs Ryan that a cleaned coin loses a good fraction of its value.
The problem is someone cleaned it. Any coin collector considers a cleaned coin a damaged coin.
Ryan asks for $2,000 for the coin. Rick is only willing to pay $1,000. After some tough negotiations, Rick agreed to settle the deal at $1,600.
Now the big question is how much do you want for it?
$2,000.
Will you take 14?
I could do 16.
Yeah, 1,600.
After this very good deal, Rick hoped to make a considerable profit on the coin. Unfortunately, Rick's intentions are ruined by some bad news. The store's security guard and Randy informs Rick that the police had marked the coin as stolen. Fortunately for Rick, the police returned the coin because the original owner has been paid by his insurance. John Lennon drawing. This man came into the pawn shop wanting to sell a drawing he bought for only $10, but the seller was convinced that this drawing was an original John Lennon drawing and wanted to sell it for $20,000. The drawing had that unmistakable style of Lennon's illustrations, simple yet expressive lines, that characteristic humor, and it was signed with that autograph we all recognize. If authentic, it would be a true gem. The seller recounted how he had found it buried among old books and magazines, but Rick became suspicious about the drawing's authenticity when he saw that the paper was too modern. The paper had a texture and composition that didn't exist at the time Lennon would have created the drawing. The seller couldn't believe it, and Rick explained that the drawing was a good forgery. The seller was still willing to sell the drawing, but Rick said he wasn't going to buy a fake work of art, and the seller walked away with his drawing and his $10 investment, visibly disappointed. Shelby Donald Duck bicycle. Rick couldn't resist the opportunity to acquire a 1949 Donald Duck Shelby bicycle. Rick was amazed by this bicycle since it was manufactured in 1949 and sold for only a year, making it extremely rare. The seller then tells Rick that he bought this bicycle on a website and now wants $3,000 for it. Before making any offers, Rick decides to share a little bit about the history behind the bicycle.
They started in the 1890s, but in the 20s, the owner had a brilliant idea. He made a bicycle that was modeled after Lindbergh.
Although the bicycle was very rare, Rick found some flaws in it that would reduce its value.
The tank needs to be restored because the colors are all screwed up there. And Donald Duck's face, I don't know if that's actually cracked or that's paint.
Without seeking the expert's authentication or conducting research on its authenticity, Rick's excitement led him to make a quick purchase for $2,250.
I'll give you $1,500.
No, I don't think I can do that.
$2,250, and I'm crazy at that price.
Okay, I'll take that.
After the purchase, Rick had the bike undergo repairs, which cost him $350. Once they finished repairing the bike, Rick went to check it out. However, the mechanic then gave him the bad news that the bike was a fake, resulting in a substantial loss of money.
I got some bad news. It's not a true Donald, it's a clone.
Despite the loss of funds, Rick remained determined to find a genuine Shelby Donald Duck bicycle to his prized collection. Austin Healey Sprite. A man came to the pawn shop wanting to sell an Austin Healey Sprite. Rick was very happy to see this article, as the Austin Healey name is well respected, and their cars can be very valuable when properly cared for. And of course, if it's of the correct year and model, which apparently this particular one was. Originally, this car was built to be small enough to fit in a bicycle shed, and only about 29,000 were made. That number helps ensure its rarity. Rick was ready to make the purchase, but soon realized it wouldn't start, which is usually a reason to back out of the deal. The owner told him it was just a few minor issues and could be easily fixed, so Rick acquired the car for $5,000. But when he took the vehicle to his mechanic, he discovered the truth. The mechanic said that the car had some serious problems with the engine, and evidently Rick wasn't going to try to fix a car that wouldn't make him enough profit to cover the costs, so he basically tried to sell it as is. Napoleon's letter. This customer came into the store and said he had a letter signed by the legendary French leader Napoleon Bonaparte. Rick was very interested in this letter because it wasn't just a basic letter, it was a letter that was sent to soldiers on every battlefield Napoleon led. Some were even made during the battle itself, so this is honestly very rare.
What do you want for it?
Well, you know I'm gonna say like 10 grand.
10 grand's just way too much. You're gonna have to come down quite a bit, man. I'll give you $2,000 for it, man. That's the best I can do.
Let's do it.
Corey got the letter for $2,000 without consulting an expert, and when he did, the expert painted a very powerful picture of what it would be worth if it wasn't a forgery.
So if you've got one of the original copies that would have been written out on the battlefield, that would be priceless. The thing is, this is not one of those original manuscript copies.
He then revealed what happened to Rick and the old man, and they weren't very happy about it.
The COA fooled me. It's fake.
Corey, why don't you take it home and remind yourself not to be so damn stupid?
Gibson Mandolin. Many people don't understand why Chumlee is on Pawn Stars because it's clear he doesn't have the knowledge or salesmanship skills to make things work, and this was clearly seen when in one episode he was running the store alone and they brought him an authentic Gibson Mandolin. Since the others couldn't help with the appraisal, it meant Chumlee had to do all the work. Rick told him not to buy anything over $1,000.
Rick doesn't like when I make big buys when he's not around, but he also doesn't like losing out on easy money. My spending limit's like $1,000,
But Chumley remembered that Rick was interested in a mandolin like this before, but couldn't get it. So in his mind, he needed to get the mandolin and bought the item for $1,500.
I'll go 14, that's pushing the barrel.
1,500, and we got a deal.
15 sounds fair. I can make a
15?
profit.
All right, that sounds good. I appreciate it.
Later, when they took this item to an expert, this is what he had to say.
And it's not even a G that Gibson ever used. You got your decal in there like a Gibson, but it's not the right decal. This is fake as hell, man.